Alright, so welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, what I'm going to be showing you is how to create panorama shot, right? What are panorama shots? Panorama shots is taking multiple images and stitching them together to become one. So this usually helps you to mimic wide angle lenses, right? Maybe like 16 mm lens, 8 mm lens, depending on how many shots you take, right? I use it for group shots a lot of times. The reason I use it for group shots is not because, in this case, I needed the wide angle lens that I didn't have, and there was no way for me to back up. Like I was literally back against the wall, so there was no way for me to go back. So this technique I use it, but most of the time, whether I have a space to go back or not, I'm most likely going to use this technique. The reason I use it is because for a large group like this, where you backing up to get everybody's face, you know that the faces of the people are going to be small. If you're using a low not really low resolution camera, if you're using, even if you are using, like, for in this case I'm using a 30 megapixel camera, when you zoom in, like, to see each faces in the group, because you are backed up, like you've gone back and a lot of their faces are really small on the screen, when you zoom in, their face is not going to be very clear. But when you use this panorama mode, what you're actually doing is you're actually doubling or tripling the megapixel depending on the number of pictures you take. So, which means in this my case, I'm using a 30 megapixel camera. If I use 2 images to create this panorama shot, I'm going to have 60 megapixel picture, which means when you zoom in, the resolution is still going to be high. So this is one of the reasons I use this. So it's a very easy technique to do. So first, as you can see, I took these shots basically for safety, because most times things go wrong and the software tell you that it cannot stitch the images together. So you just have to have safety shots for this to work. So you have to have safety shots, get the group in one pictures as possible as you can. But as you can see, I really couldn't move back because this guy is already cutting up in his frame and this girl is cutting up in the frame. So I took these shots just for safety, then I started taking the panorama shot. So now the key for taking panorama shots is, let me just show you the results, right? Let me just show you the results before I go back and tell you. Before I show you the step to use. So this is the results, right? This is the result. So as you can see, this was shot with 35 mm lens, and it's looking like I had space to go back, but I really did not have space to go back, right? So anyways, let me go back and show you. I'll walk you through the step. So this is more of how you shoot it. You have to be intentional. First of all, you have to set your camera to either aperture priority or shutter speed priority. The reason why you have to do this is to make sure that the exposure is similar, right? You make sure that the exposure is similar, especially when you're using ambient light like this, like sunlight. You know, most times cloud goes through the sun and its exposure changes rapidly. So when you use aperture priority, I use aperture priority every time, except for fast, when the subject are moving very fast, where I go to shutter speed priority. Anyways, if you don't know what aperture priority is or shutter speed priority is, you can check YouTube and get more information. Basically, what aperture priority means is that your camera is in automatic mode, but you are the one to choose your aperture. So your aperture stays the same, while your ISO and your shutter speed, the camera can control it. Now, if you're using shutter speed priority, it means that you set the shutter speed and the camera sets the ISO and the aperture. So the reason why I like using aperture priority is because of depth of field. Imagine the camera goes to f2 and you're taking group photo. You know that most of the faces are going to, they are like this picture, they are curved, so most of them are really outside of the focus area, right? So now I'm using f4, so that's why. So I shoot f4. No matter what the camera does to balance the exposure, it's not going to move the aperture. So that is one thing you must put in mind. Number one, make sure that the exposure is consistent as possible as you can. Then number two you have to do is make sure that nobody moves. There's no drastic movement from the people you're taking. So you have to inform them that, see, nobody should move, nobody should turn their face, because it's going to be fast. You can put your camera on high speed shutter mode. That means when you hit your shutter button, it's going to take multiple pictures, like that, right? So it's going to help you a lot in selecting pictures. So now what you have to do is you have to make sure that so the next step to follow is to make sure that there's enough overlap between the images. Now, depending on the megapixel of camera you're using, you have to be careful. If you're using like a 18 megapixel camera, you can take. So you remember that when you are stitching the image, the megapixel is going to double. So if you are using an 18 megapixel and you shoot 2 images to create one file, it's going to be 36 megapixel. Especially if you are shooting raw. If you are shooting with JPEG, you can have space, because this thing is CPU heavy. So if you are shooting with 24 megapixel and shoot 3, that's 48. If you shoot 2, that's 48. Shoot 3, you understand? So most likely I really stick between 2 and 3 because I don't want it to take a lot of space. So sometimes you take an image and, for example, Canon camera, the file sizes are usually close to the megapixel. So if you are using a 24 megapixel and you take with raw, you're probably going to be getting 24, 25 megapixel. So if you have 2 and you stitch those 2 together, you're going to be getting like 50 megapixel. Right, 50 megabytes rather, 50 megabytes. So with using 2 image, I'm probably going to be getting 60 megabytes because one image is like 30 megabytes, right? So anyways, so another step is to make sure that there's enough overlap, right? So you want Photoshop or Camera Raw to be able to tell that, oh, this is where the first image ends and this is where the next image starts from. For example, this and these are similar. This is similar. This will be the middle. So I'm probably going to use 3. So this is for this corner. So I'm really targeting from here to here, right? Then this is the middle. Everybody in the middle there. Then this is probably going to, this is the last one. As you can see here, the exposure changed level. Really did not matter, not so much. So I'm going to select this. So I'm going to select this, click Alt on your keyboard, select this, select the middle, right? So select the first one, select the second one, the middle that you're going to use. Then I'm going to come to this last one and click on it. Then right click, you're going to come to where it said Mesh to Panorama. You're going to click on this that says Mesh to Panorama. Click on OK. Now you're going to see your name to say validate profile. Yes, go see whatever I said. Yes, go see OK. Alright, as you can see now, this is what it created for us, right? So now you can select, you want spherical, like how you want the image to look, right? So let it update. As you can see, it's changing. You can put the perspective. So sometimes it's kind of, as you can see, it's kind of the curvature of the lens. It's mimicking wide angle lens. Wide angle lens has this distortion, right? So if you click on this auto crop and click on it, it's going to show you exactly what it did. As you can see, it just bent the images and just did some weird things to it, right? So yeah, so you can leave it to crop out whatever it did and just give you a long. So one sign of a panorama shot is that it's going to be very long like this, right? You can play with this if you want to just like help the wrap the distortion of the lens, right? So yeah, it's very simple. Once you do this, you click on it, has merged everything. As you can see that now, what this also happened is that the dynamic range has also increased, right? As you can see, the last image I used was a little bit bright, but now it just made everything and everything is there. So that is why you want to use minimal focus, especially when you're shooting raw, you want to use minimal picture, at most rather 3, depending on how big the crowd, how big the group is. So you want to use like 3, or if you want to push it too much, maybe 5. Then just click on merge. So it's going to ask you where do you want to save it. I already have this here, so let me take this to. Now, as you can see, it's saving this DNG, so it's still going to be on a raw format, right? DNG is not really raw, but anyways, let me change the name to Panda 2, right? I click on save. So now it's going to add it here, right? As you can see, this panel 2. It's going to add this here. So if you click on this and click on open, as you can see now it has opened this final panorama shot that we did. So I can come back and go to camera raw. I mean, you could have done this before you click on open, but I usually do this in Lightroom, so I don't have I really do not have all these kind of issues. But then you can come to basic, let's just click on auto and see what auto does. Okay, not too bad. Can reduce the highlight a bit, increase the shadow. Yeah. So this is what I was telling you about. The image is not really sharp because I was using f4. This is what I was telling you. F4, people on the edge are not going to be extremely sharp, right? And the lens I used, regarded the lens I used, was a very low quality lens, a Yongnuo lens. As you can see that from here, when you start coming into the focus point, that the people become, their faces is becoming very sharp, right? So as you can see, because you return panorama, you can actually crop this image to this size and the resolution is still going to be there. So imagine you send it to the client and they zoom into their picture, they zoom in on their phone or their laptop to see the faces of the group. It's still good to see them. So as you can see, this is why I was telling you to use aperture priority, right? So I could have used 5.6 or f8 or maybe f11, but I didn't want to raise the ISO too much, right? I didn't want to raise the ISO too much. Anyway, so yeah. Come to crop and come to like original ratio, and I want to crop this part out of the image. So crop it, maybe I feel it's too much. Yeah, I can crop it like this. So there you have it.